Hello and welcome to Fascinated by Fungi Live. Today I'm going to be speaking with Julie Schreiber, who is one of the most incredible people that I've met in the mushroom community. She's a chef, she's a winemaker, she is a mycophile extraordinaire. I've had a chance to cook with her in the kitchen, both at home and in sort of service situations, and I'm always impressed by her. I'm blown away, as always, by her palate, her imagination, ability to just get stuff done in the kitchen and get stuff done in the winery. And so I'm gonna bring her on board here, and I'm really excited to speak with Julie today. So we're gonna add her in. Comment or question, throw it in, and we will try to get to it. Hi, Julie. How you doing?
Hi there. I figured out how to join you, so that's good.
Excellent. Well, welcome. And happy holiday. Are you wearing a holiday sweater there? As I peek a little red there. Oh yeah, very nice. Good stuff. So I was trying to explain to people just kind of how, I don't know, epic you are in a way. You went to UMass Amherst, which I hadn't even remembered, but ZooMass, as I affectionately call it, is a place where I had a lot of friends go from high school. And
Yep.
You went to the CIA and graduated from CIA, so you have some serious culinary chops. But you also went to UC Davis and got a master's in enology. So you're kind of this, like, triple of just education and all sorts of things, interesting stuff. So
For that.
do you have any takeaways from all of that education? That do you think that kind of helped inspire you, or did you know what you wanted to do and you got the education to do it?
The first degree was at UMass, and that was more, I studied hotel and restaurant management, and I wanted to go to culinary school, but I thought I was being very practical at the age of 18. That might not work out, the restaurant thing, so I should have a degree in something else. So I did intend to go study hotel and restaurant management, but the idea was I would study a lot of other stuff at the same time. So some business related things. And in addition, I did I took one class on mystery novels and art history, other stuff.
Yeah, it's a good thing that you go to college. You got to expand your mind, learn lots of different things.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think I was around 11 or 12 when I discovered Julia Child, and I was like, hey, you can cook for a living.
Yeah.
And I've been obsessed by food for a very long time. So that was where I was like, okay. At the time, I hadn't really worked in any restaurants, and so I really had no idea what that dream really meant. But I thought dealing with food every day was a great opportunity.
Sounded like fun. Did you cook a lot as a kid? Because you come from a really big family. You have a lot of siblings, right? So were you busy in the kitchen, or?
And so yeah, I started mostly with baking. I tortured my young with things that they probably didn't want to eat. But lots of cakes and bread, and I remember starting a recipe when I was a kid and calling my grandmother and saying, what do I do? I don't have all the ingredients. So I learned early, it's good to see if you have all the ingredients first.
Yeah, that mise en place thing goes a long way. Yeah. To not struggling in the kitchen or having to stop halfway through and say, oh God, is coconut milk the same as real milk? I don't know.
Exactly. So, and sorry, I've got dogs in the background. So if they're playing in my living room, sorry about that. Hold on one sec.
Julie just got a new puppy somewhat recently, who is quite a handful. And I think she often has Oliver's dog as well. So she's got some good puppy friends around. Hey, welcome back.
One of them
got them all sorted out.
The other one wanted it. Forgive me.
It's all good. So I guess you went down this path, but
I met you, I guess, through the mushroom community, which is funny because in some ways I feel like you and I could have and maybe should have met through the wine industry because that's where we both came from professionally.
That's right.
But I think in terms of our hobbies and our passion for food and mushrooms and wine, passionate about that, but those things kind of coalesced in having our friend Matt introduce us and getting to do some really fun dinners together. But when I think about your journey through mushrooms, because you've been into mushrooms a lot longer than I have, I still feel like a complete infant and sometimes act like it.
You just have more genus and species than I do. There you go.
Well, you know, I'm curious. I'm sort of endlessly curious about it. But what first, like, did you have a mushroom experience that really caught you? Was there one mushroom that inspired you? Did you have a myco muse, or kind of how did you get into learning about mushrooms and foraging and becoming who you are today?
It feels like a million years ago. But when I graduated from upstate New York all the way to Northern California, and I lived in Fort Bragg, and I worked at Cafe Beaujolais up in the town of Mendocino. So
Nice.
when I worked for Margaret Fox and Chris Kump, Chris was a avid mushroom hunter and chef extraordinaire related to mushrooms, and I worked for him. So he's like, we buy a lot of mushrooms through the back door of the restaurant, and if you are going to be the one receiving them, you should at least know what's in the box. So yeah, that makes sense, you know, because I loved the idea of eating them, but I had no idea what I was looking at. And so I took a class at College of the Redwoods with Teresa Scholars, and so I got to learn mushroom identification from her. And I think I worked there from 91 to 93. And then when I moved to San Francisco, I opened One Market and Boulevard Restaurants back then in the early 90s.
I forgot that. Yeah, you worked at One Market, and that, like, I've been there, and that place is awesome, and I certainly had that in a pretty like high echelon of how I think about food, and to know that you were part of cementing that reputation, really cool, really cool.
When I was working there, I decided I would go on one of David Aurora's forays. He does them, or used to do them Thanksgiving, and so I met him, and I was on his event, and he was like, hey, I want to go get coffee in the town of Mendocino. Where do I go? And I was like, well, I know where to go. So David and I have been friends ever since. But I had his from taking Teresa's class, and it shows my obsessive compulsive side. So I had every genus with a tab, so I glance through the book and find out. And he was like, "Oh my God!" And so he gave me, and he's really impressed with my geeky side. So that's part of the challenge now, is all the names have changed. So
Yes, yeah.
I'm giving a talk, and I'm like, oh, thank God that one's in the book.
Well, it's funny because, you know, people have always sort of said, you know, common names are tricky, they're messy. There's a lot of things that can be in, you know, different species called the same common name.
Mm-hmm.
So use a scientific name. But the problem is now the scientific names are changing really fast because of all the taxonomy.
Yeah.
And there's been a massive reorganization of a lot of genre and a lot of things that people thought were related off of morphological characteristics that turn out to be not related at all. They just kind of co-evolved to look the same.
Right.
And so I find in some ways it's almost more helpful to talk to casual mushroom people, or even experienced mushroom people. Using common names is sometimes easier because, like, an experienced mushroom person from 20 years ago has a very different vocabulary as to what's current in terms of the Latin names.
Absolutely.
So for me, I like having both because you can move in both worlds, and ideally you can get back to what the actual Latin name is now to be. It's all a little confusing and tough sometimes, but we can navigate it. So.
But I'm lucky in that I know a lot of the people, at least on the amateur mycology side. So when somebody sends me an email or sends me a text message with a photograph, I'm like, hey, what do people call this?
Yeah.
So it's sort of similar to the wine world as well, right? So sometimes you know what book to open to find
Mm-hmm.
you need. So you don't have to have all the info in your head. You actually just know the right resource. So
Yeah, you know you'll find it if you go look in this tome. You're like, I've seen that before. I don't know the name, but I will find it's on page something or other.
so yeah, earlier this week my mom had a friend who said, "What's this mushroom that was found in my yard?" And it was half eaten, kind of mushy. And I'm like, I have no idea what this is. But
Yeah, the classic photo that people send you from like above a half-eaten mushroom that's like half rotted, and you're like, I can't tell you. I have no idea.
I have, David Campbell and Norman Grayson. They were like, I think it's this, but it could be that. So I'm like, so I send them an email and I say, well, it could be, a Boleta smithii, but it could be, and the people I'm sending it to, they have no idea. So, they genius, but I just know the right people. And I also really like Mike Wood's MycoWeb. So
Yeah, that's a good
people
one.
ask me questions. I really love that because I can send them a link and it's got massive amounts of information for them. So that one's really helpful too. So if they're like, I found this in my yard, or, what do I do? Actually, recently, a friend of mine, her dog ate a mushroom and she was really nervous at the vet. And
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of COVID, she couldn't even go inside. So she's sitting in her car waiting. And I know a lot of people that get called related to toxic mushrooms and dealing with kids and pets and stuff. And so I'm like, here's their cell phone number, here's their email address. And I actually gave her like 3 different people that work on it in different counties. And was, because at the time, the doctor she was working with wasn't being very helpful. So,
Mm.
too, is that I know a lot of mushroom folks. So that comes in really handy.
Yeah. And mushroom folks in general are very happy to jump at the chance to help.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't ID something, especially with the photos that people send, but if you get a good photo, even if you don't know it, like you said, you use your network and you can pretty quickly figure out what it is. There is some great online resources. And I think the majority of people who worry about their dog eating something have nothing to worry about.
Right.
There is the occasional Amanita phalloides or ochreata that can kill a dog, can kill a human, but they're not that common. I feel like if you have those types of mushrooms in your yard, you often know about it because they're fairly large, they're fairly obvious,
Yeah.
They're fairly easy to ID, that kind of thing. Most small mushrooms in your yard are not something you're going to have to worry about for you or your dogs. It just means your lawn is happy. Like, it's a good thing.
I frequently get people who are like, what do I have here? So, yeah.
I always think it's funny when people are like, I should rip this out, right? And you're like, no, man, it's fine. Mycelium is different from a mushroom. Like, even if you take a mushroom away, the mycelium is still there. Like, it'll come back next year. You're not like somehow getting rid of it. And that's a good thing, again, because you have healthy soil. Like, don't mess with it.
Mushrooms are cool.
Yeah. Actually, so you keep a really nice garden. And I've been to your place, and I haven't had a whole chance to like walk through your garden, but I know you have a garden.
I do.
Do you see any cool little mushrooms popping up in your garden, or like anything that you recognize, I guess,
Well,
when you water?
definitely come up in my grass, and
Okay.
I wonder what that is. Or at work, I'll see around the edges because people irrigate. We'll get let's see if you come back. There you are. So people irrigate their yards, the mulch in their yards, and so things pop up. But I mostly get stuff in the grass, and I would say, yeah, I'm not sure. LBM, that's what I call it. Yeah.
LBMs, and that's fine. I think most, even I as a quote unquote mushroom expert would say most things are just an LBM to me, or a small grass mushroom, and that kind of thing. It's the big ectomycorrhizal fungi generally that we are pursuing as edible mushrooms, and we're thinking about, and those are the ones that we know how to identify because that's what we're interested in finding, collecting, foraging for it, and eating. So, you know, that I guess what I wanted to think about a little bit with you was like the excitement of going out into the woods, and particularly this time of
Yeah.
year and this season because we have porcini. And
It's kind of
you found a great porcini last weekend,
right.
right?
I got an exceptional one. Yeah. um, I think when I picked that 3 pounds, so I was so amazed. So it's big, but it also weighed a lot, and it was
Yeah.
perfect. I I cooked part of it like 2 days ago, and then I had the other half I cooked today, and there were no
Nice.
buggy in it at all. It was just like the most perfect mushroom I've ever picked. So that's pretty amazing. Um, so there's some challenges with being a winemaker and being a mushroom forager in that harvest is right around the time when you normal people are hunting for porcini. So in fact,
Mm.
one mushroom I pick less because I'm usually in the middle of making wine. So
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, it's so great. Because for me, this is the time of year when things are just starting to slow down. And because of, whatever related, somebody's asking me a question. So
Yeah, yeah. Shroom pasta. Is that what you made with the
the
porcini?
lasagna I made with porcini as the noodles was really good.
Oh, nice. Oh.
Yeah, delicious.
Did you like cut the porcini really thin and layered it as like a lasagna kind of thing?
Roasted it first,
Mm.
really cooked, and then I added it into the everything else. So there was chard and potatoes and tomato sauce and ricotta and parmesan and what else did I have? Oh, I had some bocconcini, so some fresh mozzarella, and yeah, it was really good.
That sounds awesome.
Now, we were watching like one of those chef competitions. They were like, well, can you taste specifically the porcini? Probably not. So if we were going to do it for that, I mean, it had kind of a really great umami flavor. But if you wanted it to really taste mushroomy, I think that I would not use the tomato sauce. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Porcini tends to come through a little bit better in like a bechamel or a milk
yeah,
sauce kind of thing. You lose Tomatoes are so overwhelming. They give you so much umami, but they tend to overwhelm a lot of the mushroom. Mushrooms have a lot of like sort of subtle sweetness,
yeah,
and that's something you lose when you pair them with more powerful flavors.
exactly.
So there is something to be said for like with mushrooms, they're very distinctive flavors, but they're not quite as punchy as some things, and so they pair best with sometimes more mild ingredients,
Yeah.
where you're letting their flavors really shine through and kind of letting that develop. But so I mean, porcini. We had a really interesting porcini year,
Hmm.
this is my best season of porcini ever by a long shot.
Nice.
And we got rain in late November, and then no rain after that, which I was bummed about because I was like, I really wanted mushroom season to happen, and it's not happening.
Well, I
Uh,
had a chat with David Campbell. He's my latest muse probably, and he said I'm calculating based on this one rain
yep,
that the mushrooms will come out in about 2.5 3 weeks, and he was right exactly the day.
and he was right. Yeah.
So,
And that was the advice that I had received at some point. I heard this like years ago. They're like 3 weeks after the first big rain, you'll get porcini. I was like, I don't know about that, but
it was
you know,
that day. I think, in fact, what I did was I know Aaron Miller, and he had taken the Soma group board,
yes,
and so I got secret views of photos and videos from that, and I was like, oh my God.
yeah, he was pulling porcini hand over fist out of the
Yeah.
grass, and that made my spidey senses tingle too because I was like, oh gosh, something is happening, and I want to get out there. So I got really lucky because my first day out of sort of this season, I went out and I hopped out of the car, and within like 30 seconds, I found a porcini bigger than my head, and then like
Wow.
a minute later, I found a cluster of two that weighed almost 4 pounds, and they were massive. And usually, when you find a big bolete like that, something that's like the size of your head, you're like, that thing is so blown out and old and full of bugs, and there's no way. And you touch it, and the thing just kind of disintegrates in your hand. And these were solid. They had a nice
Yeah. Yeah.
resonance thump to them. And I was amazed. And I think that had to do with that first big rain, and then having it be dry for so long, there wasn't a lot of bug activity. And so at least the first flush of porcini this year was just absolutely epic and really exciting. But
Yeah,
I had
so
a
it's
moment where I was like, okay,
yeah, I was gonna say years ago I led a group with MycoVentures in the Sierras, and back in the day to hunt for spring boletes and morels, and so you need one for one or the other, and so I'm trying to be really nice and teach people how to forage and all that, and then I saw a mushroom and all of that niceness went away. I'm like, and I,
it's mine.
and I like, because what I should have done, it's similar this time. I was with somebody that hadn't foraged before, and in a good way, you would say, "There's a mushroom. If you see it, that's a really nice porcini," and give them time to like take a look before you grab it. And at that time and this time, I was like, "That one's mine."
It's hard. I think
Yeah.
mushroom hunting activates something in us that's very primal. There is a hunter-gatherer aspect. I think throughout human evolution and history, we've interacted with fungi. Whether or not we recognize that in our current sort of societal, cultural norms, fungi are reintegrating with the human consciousness, as we can see in media. People are becoming more and more interested. But it really always amazes me because people are like, I'm so scared, I'm so blah blah blah, and I don't have the confidence. You're like, you don't need any of those things. You just go out and start looking for stuff, and once you do, you realize like every time you find something interesting, you get a little serotonin reward and a little spark of dopamine. You're like, oh yeah, this is what I'm out here for. This is the good stuff. And just like you can take a fully rational, reasonable human being who's like patient and calm and collected, and you show them a mushroom and they just turn into like I turn into a screaming schoolgirl, just like, oh my god.
Exactly. Yep.
And I have elbowed people out of the way. I've also one time I was at a big science thing and I elbowed a Nobel Prize winner out of the way to eat some oysters. I forget he had a Nobel Prize in chemistry or something like that. But I was like, get out of my way, old man, oysters. I should probably work on that. But anyhow, so mushrooms are really exciting, and it's so much fun to like fill your basket. And certainly like I was saying, this time of year when you have the big porcini, there's nothing more rewarding than walking out of the wood with just pounds of stuff. And even sometimes, like you said, you find one and it's enough to eat for a couple of days. So they're really impressive. The problem is when you get home with that like 10 pounds of mushrooms or whatever your epic score is.
That's right.
You have a big pile of dirty ass mushrooms in a basket, and you've got to deal with that, because if you don't, they're going to go bad pretty quick. So I've had this moment a lot where I get home after a long day of foraging, especially after several hours of driving, and I'm just like, I'm defeated. It's late, and like there's this big pile of dirty stuff. Can you speak a little bit to like your experiences with trying to process mushrooms and just dealing with everything that's there?
I would say a couple of things. One, if you store them properly, you don't have to process them all on the first day. So
okay, that's a good point.
Okay, so like the one that I picked, I used half of it and I stored the other half, and I put it in a paper bag, but then I put the paper bag in a plastic bag. So when I cut it into it today, it was fresh and perfect. There were no bugs, and the moisture content was still there, and just as good as a couple of days ago. So
that's good.
That's really important. But if you get like really wet mushrooms, you can, air dry them. So sometimes with chanterelles that are just totally soaking wet, maybe mud puppies or something like that, require massive amounts of cleaning to get to the actual mushrooms. It's good to air dry them. So sometimes I'll just put them on sheet pans, cookie sheets, and I'll let them air dry for a little while. But I think a lot of people feel like they need to hand clean every single mushroom with a brush, and I don't do that. So if like when I did the the Soma has their mushroom camp every year, and I've been the chef for the camp dinners for like the last 9 years, and I'm cooking for 250 people. I am not hand brushing and
Yeah, you're not hand washing all the mushrooms. No, no, I got to help you last year and it was a great experience. And it also like really,
yeah.
I've cooked for large groups before, but I haven't done 250. And like the way that you were able to like bang out all the food, deal with all of the things that didn't quite work or people that didn't quite listen. That was what impressed me more than anything was your patience with people, even your patience with me when I messed up.
Right,
But
right.
it was a pleasure to cook with you and a joy to work with you because like not only did you make really good food and you made enough of it for so many people, you kept a very well running kitchen, which was great. So,
Uh,
but yeah, not hand washing mushrooms is a big one, or like not hand cleaning every little nook and cranny. Just run it underwater.
so I would say the people that help me, I get 20 volunteers to cook this food, and they come to camp thinking they're going to get to do camp, and then they spend all weekend.
No camp.
Every year they come back. Pretty amazing, and so their generosity is unbelievable, and so thank you. It's an impressive meal, and it tastes really good, but it's work, and it's also I feel like when you're cooking for people, you give a piece of yourself, so
Yeah.
part of it too. As far as processing for mushrooms for 250 people, I want to say thank you to Gourmet Mushrooms because they usually donate several hundred pounds to me. I call them up and I'm like, here's what I'm making. Can I have this many pounds of this, that, and the other? And they say yes, which is amazing because they donate them. So there's no way I could make meals like that without their generosity. So thank you, Gourmet Mushrooms, as well.
Yeah. That's Mycopia out in Sebastopol, and they're one of my favorite mushroom farms too. I absolutely love them. But yeah, they have a warehouse up or a production facility in Michigan too, I think, and so they distribute mushrooms around the country.
So they're having a sale today at their farm if you need mushrooms for Christmas, they sell them.
It's a phenomenal deal. They have these like 3-pound bags, and you get 15-20 bucks for 3 pounds of mushrooms. It's a phenomenal deal, and yeah, you can eat it for weeks. That's really good protein.
Yeah. So when I'm cooking with cultivated mushrooms, they're very clean. So they need the butt end of the mushrooms cut off, but I don't really have to clean them much. Somebody said we all need mushrooms. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, we have a dog in my lap.
Oh, hey, pup. Yeah, maybe Santa dropping like a 3-pound bag of maitake down my chimney.
Yeah,
that'd be nice. You hear that, Santa? I got my tree right there. I'm ready for it. Can you see all the amanitas on my tree? Jerry took some time to put all these little red amanitas on the tree. It's great.
So we have one dog in my lap.
So Julie made a good point here about like cultivated mushrooms generally don't need that much cleaning. Agaricus bisporus, which is your button mushroom that you buy in the store, I actually do clean that because they literally grow that in chicken poop. It's been like fermented and turned back into soil, but it's still poop. So I like to wash my Agaricus bisporus, but like if you're buying oyster mushrooms or king trumpets or maitake or a lot of these mushrooms, like again from Gourmet Mushrooms, it's grown out of substrate bags or substrate jars, and so there's no dirt involved in it, so they don't really need cleaning. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Joel.
Mycopia in particular, they grow them in jars. So then they literally harvest off the top of the jar, and really the only mycelium or dirt you would have was at the very bottom of the mushroom, because they grow them in such a clean way. It really doesn't require a lot. But wild mushrooms, and I try to be nice to the vegetarians and the vegans, giving them wild mushrooms.
Yep.
As opposed to the masses, because there are just fewer of them at the event. So they always get the wild mushrooms. So in case you want to come to Soma Camp in the future, maybe eat vegetarian.
You'll get more wild mushrooms.
Try to make something special and memorable because they usually get short shrift. So I try to do something special for them. But if I'm cooking with wild mushrooms, those I wash them like they're lettuce. So I'll get
Hmm.
a container of water and I'll roll them in that water and then pull them out and let all the sediment drop to the bottom of the bowl. And if the water is dirty, similar to like if you're cleaning lettuce or spinach, sometimes you have to clean it 3 times. Then that
Yeah.
you clean them 3 times. But so if I'm cooking for a large number of people, um, I'm probably doing that, but I'm not like taking a knife or a brush and individual. No,
No.
that's not happening. Uh,
And sometimes even like I know you're talking about washing mushrooms. If you have stuff like craterellus, which are like the black trumpets or the yellow feet, sometimes I'll peel them in half
Absolutely.
because a lot of the dirt is stuck in the middle of this sort of funnel. And so if you're going to do a wash, you either have to break them all underneath water yourself or rip them in half and then do that kind of rinse, rinse, rinse.
Yeah.
And
then I'll lay them out on a cookie sheet or whatever. Let some of that liquid drop off of them is helpful. But because sometimes when you're cooking mushrooms, they have lots of moisture, and so they give off a lot of liquid. And never throw that away. Always cook them until all of that evaporates. You want to keep that flavor. But
yeah.
sometimes you're cooking something, sometimes you cook porcini in particular, and they're very dry. So there's like no moisture in the pan at all. In that case, I actually pour water in. So I'll actually put a little bit of water in there to kind of, it's sort of like, let's say you were cooking sausage and you bought raw sausage. You can brown it on either side, put a little bit of water in the pan, put a lid on it, and steam the sausage. And then the sausage is completely cooked. So similarly, when I'm cooking something like a porcini, I'll add a little bit of liquid in there. Very helpful.
Yeah, I like that method because I find porcini actually king boletes to be and spring kings too to be a little bitter.
Mm-hmm.
It's just and that's just something I get a weird bitterness. It's in my palate, and other people will be like, "This tastes great," and I'm like, "This tastes unbearably bitter to me."
Yeah.
But if I add the water and have a chance to kind of cook it through, the bitterness is reduced, and or sometimes that water, if I pour it off, will help get rid of the bitterness entirely for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I learned from you just this past spring cooking butters and kings with a little bit of that water and kind of cooking them down until they get really gooey and soft. And mushrooms are, you can't really overcook a mushroom. I think people love to think that mushrooms are like meat, and they are. They have a phenomenal pairing. They work great together, but mushrooms don't overcook in the way that meat does.
Right.
You can make meat absolutely inedible by overdoing it. Whereas most mushrooms you can cook for hours and hours on end or boil them for days on end, and they're still going to have the same great texture that they had, 5 minutes in kind of thing.
I would say sometimes I cook mushrooms for a dish like 3 times. So it just depends. But I think they get better and better with more cooking. So if I'm just sauteing, I might cook them really hot. But sometimes I will, like I did with this lasagna, I cooked them twice. So they get roasted the first time, and then they get baked in the oven with all the other goodies. So it just depends. Sometimes it's 2 times, sometimes it's 3 times, or it just depends on the dish I'm making. But it makes a big difference. You want to get that caramelization. You want to cook them well. They just seem to get more flavorful with extra attention.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and like the one sort of number one hack I learned about cooking wild mushrooms, because early on I was getting chanterelles. Me and Jerry were sitting down and spending hours with like a toothpick and a brush just trying to get all the dirt off, which you never do. So chanterelles just taste earthy, which just means they have dirt on them. So we were doing this, and I was putting in butter into the pan and trying to put them in there and get it ripping hot so I could get some nice caramelization. And every time I was just ending up with these like insipid, soggy, not great tasting chanterelles. And I was like, what's wrong with me? And eventually I realized I was like, oh, I need to do a dry saute first. So I'm taking a mushroom, and chanterelles especially need this kind of treatment, but you do a dry saute, which just means put it in a pan with nothing in there.
Yeah.
Don't put any oil in, no fat, and just let the water cook out. And that's again why Julie and I don't bother we don't worry about washing our mushrooms, because your mushrooms are going to get wet in the woods. They came up with the rain anyhow. They're probably waterlogged. And
Yeah.
if they're not waterlogged, it's okay for them to get waterlogged, because you're going to cook all that water out first.
Yeah.
And ideally, what Julie was saying is that water carries a lot of the flavor. So you want to cook, you don't want to pour it off. You want to cook it down so it turns into the fond, the sort of tasty brown bits at the bottom of the pan. That's all those caramelized sugars and umami products and stuff like that, Maillard reactions.
Yeah.
And then once it's starting to just barely stick, you add a little bit of fat. And then you can kind of turn the heat down to like medium low, and you let them just slowly caramelize. You keep turning it every once in a while, and that's where you develop that really beautiful, sweet, nutty, complex mushroom flavor. And that works for almost any mushroom.
I would like to say is, I think people, you know, the average person probably never cooks for more than 8 people anyway, but so they never do what I need to do when I'm making food for the masses.
For $2.50.
But I really like using the oven. So what I've been doing lately with porcini, some I dehydrate. So some I'm happy to put in the dryer. They're usually, the pores are a little greener, or they're just a little older. So I'll put them in the dehydrator. Here's one of the dogs again.
Nope. Hey, pup.
But what I'll do is I roast them in the oven and then put them in something. So what I did earlier I guess it was a week ago, is I didn't want mushrooms to go bad while they were sitting in the fridge. So I roast them, and then because they're pretty good sized slices on the porcini, I'll flip them halfway through so they're browned on either side, and then I freeze.
Okay.
Then they're available for pasta sauce or a lasagna or soup or whatever. But they keep what is so great about a fresh wild mushroom. So
all that texture.
Yeah, exactly. So they're and then you can make a mushroom gravy for Christmas or whatever, but you have them in the freezer ready to go, and then I pull them out, and I'll do that with hedgehogs or chanterelles as well. So some mushrooms I think dehydrate really well, and some mushrooms do not at all. So
yeah, chanterelles, hedgehogs are things that they don't gain a lot from drying them, and if anything, they lose their main sort of component, which is the texture, because you can't rehydrate the texture really. So I'm totally with you that some things are definitely like, I cook it and freeze it as opposed to trying to preserve it through drying.
So if I a black trumpet or a yellowfoot, great dried, no problem there. But porcini, but there are a lot of mushrooms that just don't do well with dehydration. So if I see a chanterelle in the store that's dried, I'm like, why?
Why? Yeah, and why pay so much? Yeah, they usually charge a lot of money for it. It costs as much as like a dried morel. But dried morels are incredible because they have such depth of flavor, especially compared to a fresh one. Whereas a dried chanterelle doesn't taste like much and doesn't have a good texture. So what are you paying for? And then even I think it's Oh, go ahead.
Dried porcini, I have some that I picked, I don't know, 10 years ago plus. And they get chocolatey over time. And I know it's hard to do. Hold on to those jars of mushrooms for decades, and then pull them out when you want to do something special. So I made gravy for somebody who's gluten-free on Thanksgiving, and took broth and rehydrated these nice old porcinis, and then reduced the liquid down with the two of them together, and then thickened it with cornstarch. And it was amazingly good. So if you want, you can add some button mushrooms from the grocery store if you feel like you need more mushrooms to be in the sauce. That's fine. Or you can just have it as this amazing mushroom flavored liquid. It's really good. But there are times where the really older, I'm sorry, saying like 15, 20-year-old porcinis, if you can get a hold of them, are amazing. So
maybe a vintage porcini, you know.
That's what I'm talking
about. Twas a good vintage, you know. And one of the things I like to do with porcini is like we're talking about is like the very large ones that are kind of blown out, maybe even ones that had a little bit of bug damage, but you still took them home. And that happens because sometimes you're out in the woods and you get stars in your eyes and you're like, I want this mushroom, even if it looks a little bit past its prime. And then you get home and you're like, oh, this is full of bugs, but I don't want to throw this away because I took it out of the woods. So what do I do with it? And that's a great time to take a porcini and be like, I'm going to dry this out. It's going to really increase the depth of umami. And like you said, you can sit around and age it. You can turn it into powder. You can do all sorts of things with it. What I'll do with the smaller fresh buttons is you said freezing. And so I like to either pan roast or oven roast. And I get bitterness out of porcini when they're fresh. But if I take that cooked porcini and freeze it and then I warm it back up in a soup or a salad or on toast or whatever, I don't get that bitterness. So I really like cooking and then freezing my porcini. You can even cook them and freeze them in like individual packets. So you can kind of pull like a serving size out at a time. Because as I learned, if you have a big block of them, they can be kind of hard to like chip off porcini from the block.
I would just,
and then, go
I
ahead.
was going to just say, I love porcini powder. So
Yeah, porcini, it is absolutely amazing.
I frequently make a steak or a roast, like I made prime rib like a week ago, and I put the salt and pepper on, but I also sprinkle it pretty heavily with porcini powder.
Porcini powder, yeah.
Secret ingredient. Nobody knows exactly what you put in there. So
well, because it's going to increase the depth of umami. It'll help the crust formation. It's extra protein. Yeah, everything about that is good.
Yeah. Oh, lots of hearts for that.
And then, like you were talking about sort of the using both dried and fresh together, and that can be a really incredible way because I see a lot of people who are making mushroom gravy, but they don't use any dried mushroom. You're like, okay, well, that mushroom gravy is not going to have a lot of flavor.
Yeah.
And if you make a mushroom gravy with just dried mushrooms, like you said, it's liquid, but it doesn't have as much body necessarily.
Yeah.
And so combining the fresh ones will give you the texture and the body, and then the dried ones and the liquid, specifically the liquid from the dried ones, will give you that real depth of umami. So you can kind of create this entire, it's not just a 1 or 2 note thing. It is an orchestra of flavor, mushroom flavor.
Layering that. So here we have the other puppy.
Aww.
So I will do, especially, I've seen people throw out my mushroom liquid from rehydration and it makes me weep. But
Yeah.
I have seen it even at mushroom camp. So I really like, especially if I have a vegetarian, there's so much flavor in the rehydration water that you really need to take advantage of that. If it's morels or porcinis or black trumpets or whatever, that liquid is really important. So don't.
It's almost more important than the actual rehydrated mushroom in a way, because like the mushroom at that point is just textural. It's lost most of its flavor, but the flavor's in the liquid.
Yeah.
And that stuff's gold.
Yeah. So I highly recommend figure out a way to make soup or gravy or something like that, especially right now for the holidays. Just slather that stuff on everything.
Yeah. Well, you can even use it in, so if you rehydrate mushrooms, you can use the liquid once it's cooled down to make a batter or a bread.
Oh.
Because it's just flavor, it's a broth at that point. And you can use it for stuffing, you can use it for anything where you would want to use the mushrooms, you can then use that liquid as, instead of milk or water, you use the mushroom liquid. And then it just infuses the entire dish.
I was just thinking, one of the things I like to do also, either with porcini or candy caps, is I rehydrate in milk. So
okay,
making let's see, Yorkshire pudding. I will rehydrate mushrooms in the milk and then use the mushrooms in the batter. So you get chunks of porcini in your Yorkshire pudding.
I love that. That sounds. I gotta try that.
Yeah. Or creme anglaise, and I'm making it with candy caps.
Candy cap creme anglaise.
Yeah. So what I'll do is, for the candy caps, this is kind of interesting. I will rehydrate in the cream, and then I pull the mushrooms out, and I rinse them off, and I dry them, and you can use them again. So they give off enough flavor to reuse them. So if you don't want all the speckles of, you can use a coffee grinder and grind it up and keep it in, but why? When you can double your fun and make creme anglaise twice.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Jeez. So yeah, I guess I wanted to ask you too. So we've talked about porcini.
Yeah.
We've sort of touched on chanterelles, and then we've dabbled with the winter trio, which is yellowfoot, black trumpets, and the hedgehogs.
Yeah.
What about oyster mushrooms? Because that's one that people find a lot of oyster mushrooms, and I, as a mushroom person, used to really love them, and I like them less now because I've eaten a lot of other stuff. But I'm like, okay, they're not my favorite. But you find lots of them. Do you have like thoughts on good
Well,
ways to prep oyster mushrooms?
and I like wild ones better than the cultivated ones. The
You do? Okay.
ones to me they're okay. They just don't have the depth of flavor that the wild ones.
Mm.
But I like doing those in the oven with a little bit of olive oil, so they get kind of a crispy edge to them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
How far down that road you want to go? They can taste a little bit like bacon, and that.
Yeah, if you really kind of dehydrate them all the way down, but they're not fully dehydrated, they're still just like have that crisp and that almost burnt edge kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Mm-hmm. They're. I think you'd like them. You get chips.
Well, I do sometimes with oysters, I'll like either I'll pre-blanch them because sometimes my oysters are a little buggy. I got like springtails and stuff, and so I'll do a quick blanch, get all the bugs off,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll dry them, air dry them, or just kind of pat them dry.
Yeah.
And then do a quick like dredge or tempura fry, and then make like fritters, or not fritters, but put them in tacos or sliders and
Oh,
stuff like that. And you can also do it fresh. You don't have to do the blanch. Just I have a lot of buggy stuff, and sometimes I come home with buggy mushrooms because I had to come home with something, and so I have to then process it in a way that makes it not gross.
so one thing I wanted to mention is I just like going in the woods. So if I can go out and forage and I only find one mushroom, I actually am okay with that, because really what I needed was to get outside and get away from all the craziness of the world right now, and being in the woods is like bonus. Or finding a mushroom is bonus.
Finding a mushroom is a bonus to just being out there.
She really wants to go outside, and I don't want her to go outside. So I would say, that's the key. Finding mushrooms, that's lovely. I really like it, but it's not necessary. So you never know these days when you take people out to foray whether you're going to actually find anything. So you have to find a reason why you want to go. So definitely, it feels like a blessing of some sort.
Nature chose you. You were lucky in that moment to notice this thing and come across it.
You're home and it's raining, and you're like, it's so nice and warm here. You want to go.
It's
so you have to be like, no, it's worth it, because as soon as you get out there, you're happy you're there. So
yeah, it really does, and it's so motivating for me, especially because I feel like winter used to come and I would just be indoors for like 4 or 5 months in a row, and now I'm like, no, now is actually the time where I'm going to be outside more than in summer. In summer it's hot. Why would I go outside?
Right.
I stay inside with the air conditioning. Now I'm like, oh, it's raining, great. Let me get out there with the slime mold.
Okay, second thought was, when you pick mushrooms, if you want to make your life way easier, try to clean them as much as you can before you put them in your bag or your basket.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you'll thank yourself later. The amount of hours that you spend cleaning will be much diminished if you don't have something with a lot of dirt in it. If you get dirt inside the gills, it's really hard to get it back out.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. We frequently will carry a knife with us and just quickly clean up the mushroom as much as possible before we put it into the bag or basket. And then when you get home, you can slice it, especially porcini, you can slice it up and go. You don't have to spend all evening, because I've seen it, hours and hours and hours of cleaning mushrooms, because that's not, you want to be like enjoying the mushrooms or whatever, because it's usually a long drive home as well.
Yes. Yeah, so it can be hard to get home and have this huge bag of dirty stuff, but sustainability wise, it's actually a better practice to clean the mushrooms in the woods, because you're messing around with the mushrooms, so you're causing spores to fall off, you're brushing off any of the detritus and dirt back to where it belongs. And if you're trimming the stem of the mushroom, that's the stem butts in theory are supposed to regrow mycelium. So by trimming your stem butts back onto the forest floor, you're helping to spread that mycelium.
Yeah.
And so it's all, and then it makes it way, way easier. And even like I've seen that too, where I've been really fastidious about cleaning all my mushrooms, and then somebody will just come toss one dirty mushroom in my basket, and I'm just like, ah. You know, it really does help to clean as you go. And then another thing you do as soon as you get home, or even like when you get back to the car, you can lay out all your mushrooms and take a photo. Get home, you lay them out again, and every time you lay it out, a few more bugs come off, a few more, you know, needles come off, and so every time you kind of lay them out and look at them, and you repackage them into a paper bag, into another plastic bag, into the fridge, you're cleaning in every successive step.
Yeah.
But that's the journey of processing, that you have to do that. You know, it's all work. It's fun work, but you know, when you're up at like 3 a.m. with a huge pile of mushrooms, and this happened to be the night, I was like, at 2:30, I was like, I'm throwing in the towel. I'm gonna slap everything in a bag and I'll deal with it tomorrow. You know.
Because I did see somebody on Facebook was so proud of their giant pile of dirty mushrooms the other day, and I was like, oh no. And
yeah,
you know, I'm talking like, you know, that's another thing I wanted to bring up is I pick enough for me. I'm not selling.
yes,
I don't have a massive number of people here at home that I need to feed. I don't need to pick 50 pounds of mushrooms. I'm happy picking one mushroom and saying, cool, I'm good with that. Because I know I will bring it home and I will actually eat it. Because nothing I hate more than putting a whole bunch of mushrooms in your fridge and they go bad and then you have to throw them away anyway.
yeah,
So for me, I kind of feel like some people are really super boastful, and they're picking a massive amount of mushrooms, and if they need them because they're eating, or they're picking a whole bunch because they want to sell them, okay. But I just feel like there's no need to be that boastful, and there's no need to overpick.
yeah,
But I just feel like I'm happy teaching people how to forage. I'm happy getting mushrooms that I'm going to eat myself, but I don't feel I need like a month's worth of porcinis that I'm not going to eat, right? So if I find a handful today, I'm happy. But I know there are a lot of people that they just it's like you get the gold fever, and you find the gold nugget and you want more, more, more. But
right.
for me, I'm happy that I was in the woods, and I'm happy that I had this really great meal. And I frequently have.
Oop, I lost you for a sec. Your audio has cut out for just a moment. You there? Oh, sorry, Julie. Oh no, I've lost you on the audio. Oh well. Hey. Shoot. Well, one of the points I wanted. Oh, okay, we lost Julie. Maybe she'll be back. One of the points I wanted to make, and Julie touched on this, and I think it's really important, is sort of the ethics of mushroom foraging a little bit, and the idea that, you know, don't take more than you need, which can be hard because occasionally, we got Julie back. Just don't take more than you need, because you're going to sometimes feel the desire to take a lot, you know, especially if you find a lot, but it's like, it's a good ethical thing to never take more than what you need, or also more than what you can actually process and what you can handle. So Julie and I spent a lot of time talking about what it is to get home and process mushrooms, and it can be a real pain in the ass. If you pick 20 pounds, man, it is your responsibility to process that 20 pounds of mushrooms. And this is much like the same thing of, you know, if you're going to kill an animal, you are responsible to use all the parts and pieces of that animal, you know, snout to tail kind of thing. You can't just cut off the best parts and throw them back out there. That's not ethical. It's not sustainable. So much with mushroom foraging, you have to be responsible and a steward of the land, and never take more than you really, really need. And that's really important. So I try to get Julie back in here, ooh, let's see, maybe this will work. I have a feeling that maybe Julie's Wi-Fi kicked out in a little bit of a weird way. I'll see if we can get it back on. If not, it's been really amazing to talk to her. And the other important things I want to mention, and we'll dive into this more depth if I get Julie back here, is that Julie is part of a company called MycoVentures. And so if you've heard about all the great food that Julie cooks, you can go out on a Myco adventure with her up to the mountains in the spring. This is in California. They'll take you to the alpine regions and go morel hunting, go hunting for the spring porcini, which are absolutely huge and gorgeous and beautiful. And then Julie will prepare an entire meal for you. So after a full day of hunting around and being in the woods, you come back and Julie has prepared a gourmet meal for you. So this is like glamping in the extreme, where you have a CIA trained chef and amazing winemaker sitting around making you, custom food after a full day of mushroom hunting. So those micro adventure things are really cool, really exciting. Let me see if I can get Julie in here one more time. I don't know what's going on with the Wi-Fi, but it's a little strange. Maybe it's my Wi-Fi too. There you are. Hey, sorry, you're back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. I was just trying to, do you want to talk a little bit about, before we go, about MycoVentures and then maybe some of your winemaking and stuff? Because I'm trying to capture all the depth that is Julie, but we only have an hour, so.
So professionally, I work as a consulting winemaker, and we could spend an hour just talking about that.
We could. It's longer than that. But.
Funny because frequently people know me for one thing or another. They know me for food, or they know me for mushrooms, or they know me for wine, and then they don't realize it's all the same person. So yeah, that's how I actually make my living, is I make wine. So we can spend another hour, maybe another day on that. But as far as the MycoVentures, I'm partners with David Campbell, and we do, right now it's a little challenging, but we will get back to it. We do half-day forays out to the coast, and so we'll do a mushroom hike, an ID table, and then I'll cook up whatever edibles we found that day. So people can, let's see if, oh, there you are. I think you're back. So we will cook up whatever is edible, and then people can taste the individual mushrooms, and so they know. When people say, "Oh, it tastes like a mushroom," I'm like, "Well, what does that mean?" So
yeah.
try to cook up whatever edibles we find. So sometimes it's one, but sometimes it's a dozen different mushrooms that you get to taste. So that's really great. And then lately, I've been doing events with Relish Culinary Adventures. So David and I do those, and we do a mushroom hike. And then I make, this year it'll be a 3-course meal, but last year it was a 4-course meal. So you can, I do a cooking demo and I show you how to cook mushrooms, and then you get to eat a really great meal with me. So this year we're doing coq au vin and chocolate cake with handicap creme anglaise. And I've been making these chanterelles, we call them bewitched chanterelles, but I roast them, and then I soak them in a sweet vermouth with sweet spices, drain them in a jar, and then I cover them with apricot brandy, and then I age them for several months, and then I serve those with the chocolate cake. So
wow.
You can make lots of yummy things with mushrooms. But
yeah, no kidding.
So yeah, so we do events with Relish Culinary Adventures, and so we're supposed to do I think we were supposed to start January 3rd, but because of the shelter in place, I think we'll start maybe a week after that. But so both of those are happening. And then in the spring, David and I do morel forays. So we do a multi-day event in the Sierras, and we rent houses. And then I make breakfast and dinner every day that we're on the foray as well. So you get to hunt mushrooms with me, and then you get to eat mushrooms with me. So
that sounds pretty cool. Having I don't know, Julie, I don't think you and I have gone mushroom hunting together, but I know that we've cooked together, and so having gotten to cook with you, I would, anyone should jump at that opportunity to get to eat and cook and hang out with Julie. It's a good one. So
I need more friends. So I know Matt in particular has been an avid fan of me for a while. We cooked at David Aurora's house together. And so when he eats at my house, he did it on Facebook. So he's like, look what we just ate. So as I said, people drive by my house and they're like, hey, I've got mushrooms. You want to eat? And so I'm like, sure, it's 10 p.m. Why not? Come on over. And we pick up whatever we've got. So it happens regularly, especially this time of year. Not so much in this environment, but I do miss that because people would be like, I got a bag full of whatever. I'm like, ooh, let's make some gnocchi. Let's make some pasta. Let's yeah.
I mean, I currently have probably 10 plus species of mushrooms in my fridge, of which a lot of them I've cooked down because I'm trying to process them and stabilize them.
Yeah.
But I'm used to having dinner guests, so I can be like, cool, I'm going to dump all of my excess mushrooms from the past week into this dish. Yeah. I'm going to eat them with people who are nerdy and want to eat weird species with me, because Jerry frequently won't eat some of the things that I'm cooking.
Yeah.
And I really miss being able to have, Julie and Matt and other people over to say, hey, we're going to just have like a mushroom throwdown and eat as many different species as we can in a sitting kind of thing.
Yeah.
At least edible species. I don't try experimental things on other people. Usually that's me late at night.
But other challenges of we make so much food that there's no way we can consume it all.
Right. And my problem is now, like, if I make something that Jerry likes, she'll eat the rest of it, and I'm fine with it. But if I make something she doesn't like, then it's on me to eat it, and I'm like, oh crap, I only eat leftovers like once, and then I'm done with them. So, I'm really, really looking forward to the day that we can have like big, expansive, cool dinner parties, especially because I've been stockpiling mushrooms for stuff like Carisium crab cakes and stuff like that, because I was planning on doing a bunch of catering this year. That never happened. So I have a freezer and fridge full of mushrooms that all need eating.
Mm-hmm. Well,
someday soon.
It definitely is a little bit hard. But, the virtual thing, you can't taste what I made, and vice versa. I do post occasionally foods that I've made where I'm like, this turned out really great. So, or if somebody asks me like, what did you do with that? So yeah, that porcini lasagna I made this week, that was really great. So
yeah, that's a good one
for me.
Oh man, well, Julie, it's been fun. It's I'm sad that we can't, like I said, get together and do big dinner parties, but you know what? This is a pretty good one, and I know that I'll see you in the new year. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and sharing your compendium of mushroom knowledge and practical cooking advice, because I think that's a lot of people can wax philosophical about mushrooms for a long time without really saying much. And I think when you deliver information, it's very pointed, very technical, and like it's really useful information. So I appreciate everything that you shared with us.
Did you just want to see if anybody had any questions before we?
Oh, sure. Yeah. If anyone has a question here, I'm happy to answer them.
Haven't really. I see occasional questions floating by, but
we got a couple of good sort of comments and people thinking about stuff. I think that what you mentioned about the chanterelles like soaked in vermouth and aged in apple brandy and stuff, that sounds really cool. That's one of my goals this year, is to do more sweet mushroom preps.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've made Chad's like black trumpet jams. I've had that. I've done candied yellow feet, just cooked down in sort of a simple syrup, but I added some candy caps to that, so it was like a candy cap yellow foot dressing for ice creams and stuff. I put them on biscuits, but yeah, I gotta mess around more with the sweet mushroom preps. Those are cool.
So it just occurred to me, lately people have been asking me to put recipes in their cookbooks. So
yeah, oh yeah, you're featured in the Modern Forager cookbook.
Yeah, they put me in there. There are 4 recipes in that book. And Eugenia Bones got another, I think it's with Fantastic Fungi. They're doing a cookbook as well. So lately, people are asking for my recipes. So I'm happy to help people cook something if they feel like they need some pointers. I frequently see stuff online, and I'm like, they overproofed that dough or whatever. But so I'm happy to answer questions if people have them. It doesn't have to be right now.
Yeah.
They can send me a message, and I'm happy to answer it. I also have friends that send me recipes, and they're like, next time we're together, can you make this? So I do that too. So I'm happy to. Oh, I see somebody liked the idea that I was in that book. So there are many ways to taste my food. So we didn't have to share. I like the sharing. I think that's really great.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best things is because mushrooms have this capacity to foster community and really bring people together. And I think it's awesome to see, so many different stratifications of the mushroom community and people all over the place, and yet there is some commonalities and there's ways that we can all share together, and whether that be through social media or through recipes and cooking, through movies and books and magazines and all sorts of stuff. There's this incredible sort of burgeoning movement. And I think that as people get to know more and more about mushrooms, that you may be one of those people that people look up to over and over and over again, because I know I certainly do. And I think, you mentioned people like Eugenia Bone, who's like kind of a big deal author, and yet, you guys are friends, you hang out, and Julie is one of those people. She's featured in the book and
years ago, and I actually, she wrote about it in her book. That I helped her build a tent because she was from New York and put a tent together before. So yeah, she's written about me too. But so as I said, I've been doing the mushroom thing for a long time, and so I've met a lot of people along the way, and a lot of really great people. So it's been a lot of fun. I highly recommend, get to know some of us strange mushroom folks.
yeah, that's good advice, right? And the community is easy, and it's not hard to jump in and meet the people that we've talked about. Everyone's pretty, as long as you're friendly and you're open and you're willing to listen, I think anyone is willing to teach you. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, happy holidays. Thanks again. I'm gonna say hi to Jerry, and you say hi to Oliver and the puppies, and I hope you have a wonderful time with your brother and all the stuff. So
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks everybody for watching. We appreciate it.
thanks, guys. Bye. Happy holidays.
Bye.
Bye, Julie.